we have the community platform. We told you that we would respond to this question. So there was a question that was
Such a
posted.
good question.
Phenomenal question that was posted on the community platform. Many of our certified coaches began engaging, and some other folks started engaging and answering this question, kind of giving some responses. Phenomenal responses. And so we wanted to kind of have an opportunity to also wrestle through this question as well. Okay, so here was the question. Does anyone else struggle with theology that says everything that happens in life, especially all of the painful parts of our stories, is all part of God's plan? This has been one of the reasons that I haven't wanted to have intimacy with God. If he allows, or even worse, causes tragic things to happen, as some say, then how can he be trusted?
Yeah.
I've heard so many times people say in one way or another that whatever happens is okay or will be okay because he brings good out of it. Somehow, though, the good never negates the bad, or from what I have both seen and am currently experiencing, even makes it worth it. I don't want my daughter's death to be, just kind of pause for a second, let that sit in. Like, wow. I don't want my daughter's death to be necessary for anything.
Yeah.
And nobody would blame you for feeling that.
Yeah.
And I don't know what to do or how to reconcile that and trust God in the future. Any insight would be helpful. I know people have many different beliefs. Trauma and tragedy really work through to test and cement those beliefs. That is true. That is true. Wow. It's a byproduct of the intensity of the painful experiences, at least from what I've observed.
Yeah. Wow. What a great.
First of all,
what a great
wonderful question.
I was just thinking.
Second of all, thank you for being vulnerable and asking that question. That's why that space exists. It takes a lot of courage to ask a question like that and not know if you're going to get responses, and then not know what kind of responses you're going to get. So we want to honor that, and we want to do our best in our limited, finite knowledge and understanding it. We want to do our best to wrestle through that with you. So Aubrey, do you want to kind of take that first?
Do I want to take the hardest theological question that there is?
Oh man.
Sort of like the existence. This is the existence of evil question, right? And the kind of theodicy question. How can God be good? And the hard part is this paradox holding the reality that God is good and evil is evil at the same time is, I think, one of the most challenging and real aspects of our faith. And I mean, it is an act of faith because it is actually choosing to say there are unspeakable, horrific atrocities in this world. Look, we just had a school shooting in the Dallas area, Uvalde last week. That should not have happened. That is an evil, unspeakable atrocity. And it would be disingenuous, inauthentic, and I think really, really damaging for us to go, but God had a plan. God's going to make it all turn out for good. Like this is the difficult thing about evil, because it is so chaotic and it is so unspeakable. You just cannot wrap it up in any type of package that makes it potable for people. And we shouldn't try to. I think that is actually the wrong move.
Yeah, and that's where Christians go wrong and awry so many times.
They want
So anyways.
They want to balance the scales of grief, and do God's job, right? And go, well, this happens so that XYZ. No. Just,
it's like we want to defend God's some kind of defense there.
And I think we have to get better at being like, oh no, that's evil. Pierre, just stop there. It is okay to grieve and lament and say this is horrific, because
I think some of it is because, Aubrey, we we don't feel comfortable with that.
Certainly we don't feel comfortable with it. No. And
so
who could, right?
Right. So anyways, I'm sorry.
No. You're totally right. So I think this is the question. And I think this is holding both of those things at once. Evil's evil and God's goodness is the act of faith, ultimately, bottom line. I personally don't believe that God causes cancer, school shootings, evil. I just really believe that's the work of the enemy. I do believe that there is a real spiritual enemy. We've seen so much evil over the past 2.5 years. I don't know how anybody could not think evil is real. But this is where two things. we lean into what we like, you know, this is probably too like theological, but Davey, you and I have talked about this on the show before. We lean into what we call already not yet, which is that we know on the cross, Jesus not only died for our personal sins, but also defeated the powers of hell and evil and death by his death and by his resurrection. And we experience down payments, deposits of that now. But because we're in that not yet, we are still waiting for the day that Revelation 21 talks about, when Jesus will one day bring a swift and decisive end to evil forever and make all things new. No more pain, no more suffering, no more sorrow. And so this is where, while we live on earth, like there just aren't great answers, but we have the resource of God, the presence of God, and the hope of his promises of Revelation 21, that like all shall be well because of the power of his death and his resurrection. And we're looking forward to his return. In the meantime, man, we need each other, and we got to borrow each other's faith, and we have to cling to the things that we're hoping for, even in really, really unspeakable things. But no, I don't think anyone, the woman that shared this question, I don't think her daughter's death is necessary. I think that's an act of evil, and we get angry about that as followers of Jesus. Jesus got angry about death.
That's right.
We know that Jesus is ultimately has power and authority over death, and we'll see that in the end. We will.
Right. Yeah, that's so true. That's so good, Aubrey. That was very, just very well put. I think, again, to go back to the way I would respond to this is to go back to the reality of that this is not part of God's plan.
Right. It's not.
At all.
Yeah.
In fact, I think we see a glimpse of that in John chapter 11 with Jesus as he approaches the scene with Lazarus' death.
Yes.
Now, although he chose to wait and stay, you know, when he could have come immediately to heal Lazarus from the sickness, as Mary and Martha indicted him, and as the disciples were insistent with him, he could have, but he decided to wait. Now, there's a whole lot of theological implications and wrestlings within that as well, right? But as he approaches the scene, we see in this very poignant, powerful, shortest verse in the Bible but might pack the most punch of any verse in the Bible, Jesus wept.
Yeah.
And I have to ask the question, why did he weep? Because he knew what he was about to do. He knew he was going to resurrect Lazarus.
Right.
So like if he was operating through that lens, he wouldn't have wept. He would have been like, guys, why are you weeping? Stop crying. You know, this is not.
It's all gonna be okay. It'll work out.
This is a funeral. This is a resurrection. Let's go. Right. This is not what he does. He weeps.
Yep.
And the reason that Scripture implies that he weeps is because he looks out and he sees everybody else mourning. And I think there's a couple things that happen right there. I believe that Jesus sees the suffering of humanity. The whole plan, so to speak, has gone awry because of sin.
Yeah.
Right? The perfection of creation, the way God intended originally for us to exist with him in perfect peace and harmony and shalom in the garden, that has gone completely awry. And now we're in this like critical moment, which happens to be right before Jesus is going to the cross to bear the burden of that for all of humanity. Right. And I think he's overwhelmed in this moment going, this is not how it was supposed to be.
That's right.
And so Jesus has entered into this suffering, which tells us a whole lot about Jesus, right? Which is counter to any other religious worldview and figurehead that anybody else can espouse.
Yep.
Because everybody else, all other political, religious worldviews and figureheads, they kind of look into suffering. And they speak about the suffering. Jesus knows it well. He's very well acquainted with grief. And so we serve a high priest who knows our suffering intimately.
That's right.
Who can empathize with us.
Yeah.
And so there's that. This was not part of God's plan, right? So it's gone awry. Now, we talk about in the Pain to Purpose course, and we've talked about it on the podcast, we've overviewed this a little bit, kind of the 4 perpetrators of pain, why there are 4 main reasons there are pain, you know, fallen and broken world, other people's sinful choices, my own sinful choices, and the spiritual battle that's going on.
Yeah.
None of which, though, God is to blame for.
Yeah.
And that's where we often try to put the onus or the blame is on God. Right. Where we go. Right. Now, it does cause a lot of questions to arise when we go, well, but God's all powerful. Could he not have prevented this from happening? Could he not have stopped this?
Right.
And in some cases, we see that in Jesus that he reverses things that he
Mm-hmm.
stops things, that he
Mm-hmm.
intervenes. So why did he choose to intervene here and not here? And I think if you can get to that place, right? Let me put a pause. Like, let me just pause for a second, because I'm talking about this very cerebrally right now, like very rationally, very, okay, this is a whole lot of work that I've had to do personally and intimately with the Lord to wrestle through the loss of my wife, right? And go, now I connect with God very cerebrally. Mm-hmm. That's part of the way I connect. If I can begin to like wrestle with and go, okay, as I start to put this together rationally, but there are moments like in this space, right? If you can get all the way to the place where, well, this wasn't God's plan, he's not to blame for this, but he did allow it. Hold on a second. Why did he allow this?
Right.
That's where it butts up against the rationale for me.
Yeah.
That's where I go, I can't reasonably explain why God allowed this. Mm-mm. Was Amanda's death necessary for anything to take place? Well, people could point to and go, well, nothing is wasted, wouldn't have been birthed, and all these people have been helped, and all this kind of, well, okay, great, but is that worth it?
Right.
I can't answer that question. I'm sorry. If I say no, that wasn't worth it, then that dismantles every one of you guys who have been impacted by this and healed in your own right. So it's like, no, sorry guys, it wasn't worth it. And then at the same time, I'm like, but if I say yes, it was worth it. No, that's not how I feel.
Right. Of course not.
I would trade it in a heartbeat. Right. Mm-hmm. And so we live in this, as you just said, this reality of like, I don't know. This already not yet. I don't know. Like I can't.
Yeah.
I'm living in this present reality of I didn't foresee this happening, and you didn't foresee what happened to you in your life, and yet there's a space that God meets us in that.
Yeah.
And that is where I would encourage every person listening to this, that even though it doesn't make any sense, and even though it can cause these emotions and this anger and this frustration and this confusion toward God, that, again, as we mentioned in the last podcast, if you go to God with that frustration, he will begin to give you the personal insight into the mysteries of your own story that will provide a healing salve onto your heart.
Yeah.
What the temptation is for me to explain, hey, here's how God showed up for me and showed me peace in the midst of this, right?
Yeah.
Not like reason or explanation or anything. He gave me peace and contentment in the midst of this. But my temptation would be to superimpose that into or project that into your story. I can't do that. God showed that to me personally.
Yeah.
I can share with you how he did for me, but it's going to happen differently for you.
Yeah.
Where God's going to show up and he's going to, like, as long as you're leaning into him with these questions, he's going to make himself known, as we said. And it's going to bring this, and that's where he ultimately, his plan out of all of this pain is to ultimately bring us back to shalom.
That's right.
And shalom is a peace that passes all understanding. And we can get to shalom here on this side, the not yet side of things. We can still get to shalom and peace.
Yeah.
And then one day there'll be final and full restoration, where J.R.R. Tolkien says in like the whole Lord of the Rings series, where he renders all things sad untrue.
Beautiful.
Where it's like, wait, what?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's where I think we begin to see beauty in the midst of this absolute tragedy. That doesn't mean it's worth it. That doesn't mean that there's a necessary, like that one has to precede the, that's not what that means. What it means is that there is the two that can exist simultaneously.
Yeah.
So
that's such a good question.
Whew.
Yeah, such a good question.
And that's only scratching the surface, guys.
Right, right.
Here's what we'll do with this episode. I'm going to put a link to several books that helped me. Aubrey, I don't know if you have any books that you
absolutely
that kind of, as you wrestle through this, like you're talking about like pages and volumes of these really dense thinkers who like wrestled through all this stuff.
Yes.
You know, like A Grief Observed was really important for me to read from C.S. Lewis. Where he wrestled through all of this himself. And so we'll put a link to a blog post that I've done, and Aubrey will get some books from you that you would suggest as well.
Yeah.
Where if you want to go wrestle with this stuff, go wrestle with it. And again, we would encourage you to post and ask questions and comment about this on the community platform. And then go to nothingiswasted.com. We've got a lot of resources there available to you to help you take back your story. We want to help you partner with God to take back your story And there's a lot of ways that you can do that through the Pain to Purpose course, through hiring a certified coach to help you walk through and wrestle through some of this stuff. Some great resources available as you're wrestling through this.